A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. Quote Shigeru Miyamoto regarding the Ocarina of Time delays. It's actually not a confirmed quote from Miyamoto, rather an industrial catchphrase. What you can't deny is that Miyamoto used it like no one else. The Legend of Zelda is praised to have one of the best quality consistencies of all time. Almost every home console Zelda game is critically acclaimed. Zelda 2 Adventure of Link is the only actual home console game that they've had a misfire with, and even then, it has a 70% on Metacritic. Every other Zelda game has an 85 or above. Take out the original NES game, and every game has a 90 or above. So cool. Zelda games are almost always critically acclaimed, but they're also almost always delayed. Is this the reason behind its stunning quality? There are 10 mainline home console Zelda games, technically 9 since one of them hasn't been released yet, but out of them, only 2 have below a 90% on Metacritic. One of them has the all-time highest score and stands as the world's most acclaimed video game. Only 3 out of the 10 were released on the first announced release date. The rest of them were all delayed, and some were delayed numerous times. The Legend of Zelda was released without delay, Zelda 2 Adventure of Link was delayed, A Link to the Past was released as planned, Ocarina of Time was famously delayed numerous times. Miyamoto dropped the quote, "The game became the highest rated game on numerous game review sites, including Metacritic." Majora's Mask was the third and final game that came out on time. The Windwaker was delayed, Twilight Princess was delayed and became cross-generation, Skyward Sword was delayed, Breath of the Wild has had the most delays of any Zelda game so far, going from a Wii U game to being cross-generation with the Switch. When it finally came out, it shook the world. And now in 2022, Breath of the Wild 2 has been delayed to 2023. Nintendo has been asked this a couple of times, and they have replied. They said that Zelda games are always hard to predict when it comes to launch. Breath of the Wild is the latest game in the series, and it was heavily delayed many times. Officially announced in 2013 under the name Zelda U, the game just didn't come out. Set for a 2015 release, it was delayed, then delayed again, and moving years 2016, they pushed it back even further, and then the game's release coincided with the Switch's release, so they pushed it back even further to March 2nd, 2017, launching alongside the Switch. It's obvious why it was delayed. The game is huge, random errors occur, ideas are scrapped, new ideas appear. Eiji Aonuma stated that the main reasons towards delay is the game's high technical demand, but the secret to the delay was of course time. Look at Breath of the Wild. This game is huge. Of course it was going to take forever to develop. To make everything and everywhere look as crisp as possible, they just needed time. Miyamoto said, "It would be great if we didn't have to put out a release date at all." Couple this with Nintendo releasing the Switch, they obviously had to make it a launch game. I mean, this game took blood, sweat, and tears to develop. Why would they put it out on this already dead console when you can put it out on the brand new console that had almost nothing coming out for it on launch? They did this with Twilight Princess on Wii. It's a no-brainer. As for Breath of the Wild 2, we really don't know much. The game was unveiled during Nintendo's annual E3 conference on June of 2019. 2 years of silence later, in the 2021 E3 press conference, Eiji Aonuma showed off a brand new trailer commemorating Zelda's 35th anniversary, revealing a 2022 release. Come 2022, in March, the game was delayed, this time to an unset release in spring of 2023. Why this is unclear. Eiji Aonuma didn't have any specific reason for us. Speculations rose. Many came to the simple conclusion of, hey, this game's gonna be huge, it's hard to say for sure when it's done. Others say it's because of the release lineup in 2022. But another theory is new hardware. I do think it's highly unlikely, and this is a topic for another time, but think about it. This wouldn't be the first time Nintendo has delayed a Zelda game for new hardware. Look at Twilight Princess. Look at Breath of the Wild. Again, hardware most likely isn't why it was delayed, but it's still a possibility. These days, it's way more complicated. Competition, new hardware release, lack of games next year, too many games this current year can all affect a game's launch, even if the game is pretty much done. This only raises expectations for the game to be better, only to find out the delay was only to waste time and not to make the game better. Luckily, Zelda games are always improving. Back in the 90s, none of this mattered. Ocarina of Time was set for a 1997 release. Summer 1997 came, they said fall. Fall came and went, they said winter for sure. Winter came and went, they said let's try spring one more time. The game was confirmed for a spring 1998 release. It came out in November. Skyward Sword had a rare secret delay. The game was in development for 5 years. In an interview, Satoru Iwata and Miyamoto revealed that the game was planned to release in late 2010. The release was unannounced luckily, but the game was far from complete in 2010. The game ended up coming out in 2011. Twilight Princess was supposed to release in 2005 on the GameCube. The game needed work, so it was delayed to 2006 and released alongside the Wii. Unlike Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess had a huge difference between the GameCube and Wii versions. In the GameCube version, Link is left-handed. Since the game was going to be a Wii launch title, they wanted to incorporate motion controls but ran into a huge problem. Link was left-handed, but the Wiimote would be held with your right hand. To complicate things even more, Nintendo decided it was mainstream to simply re-edit Link's model and make him right-handed. They decided to flip the entire game. The entirety of Twilight Princess on Wii is mirrored. This is what happens when a game is developed for one console, gets delayed, and goes cross-gen. Windwaker has a really unique story. The Windwaker featured this new cutesy artsy style. Zelda fans didn't like this. Now that the GameCube was out and graphics could be grittier and more realistic, they wanted a dark Zelda game like the previous two, Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, but with new GameCube graphics. Seeing as the new big mainline Zelda game was a cartoony sea adventure, people weren't hyped like they were for previous releases. Nintendo caught on to this and they decided they could take their time. They delayed the game for about 5 months and added a few changes to the game. The game came out, everyone loved it, everyone wanted a follow-up to the Wind Waker style. We got dark and gritty Twilight Princess instead. Wind Waker definitely had a unique story with its delay, but the other games I mentioned simply needed more time to be refined. With games like Breath of the Wild, it's a little unclear if they needed to refine it or if they needed to fix things like bugs or glitches. Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2 just needed more time, and is unspecified why they were delayed. Some games still needed to be completed. Ocarina of Time and Skyward Sword were both still half-baked and needed to be completed. Twilight Princess needed the left-hand problem to be fixed, along with making the game compatible with the Wii properly. Wind Waker didn't need a delay, but it benefited from one. Miyamoto has expressed his wish to take all the time he needs and not put out a release date at all. And with Zelda, that is all the more true. Overall, the main reason is the scope of Zelda games. It's difficult to predict a launch window for its genre of games. And because there are so many Zelda games in the series, a trend is easily spotted. It's a little worrisome to see every Zelda game be delayed, yet time and time again, the Zelda series uses time very wisely. The one series with the single greatest quality consistency, also known for taking its time. The Legend of Zelda. Haste makes waste, and slow and steady wins the race.